Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruber. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Kathy Gruber.
And I'm Jason Mefford, and today we're going to go back. Yeah, we're both like going back in our chairs, but we're going to talk about, because I think there's certain points in our life when we kind of stop and reflect and we have these different inflection points that Kathy's actually gone through one recently that we thought would be a good kind of basis for today's episode, because it's something that we all experience in our own ways and at different times throughout our lives. So Kathy, maybe if you want to kind of tee it up, and then let's just kind of talk about it, because we all experience it. I experienced some of those things this last week myself. So
just to be clear, we're talking about going back.
Yeah, we're talking about going back.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because we were going to start with the other one, and I got confused. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page as you.
Okay, so here we go.
We're going to talk about going back. So yes, I'm here. Hello. So I am heading back to Pittsburgh in a couple weeks with my husband, and it will be my first time back since we sold my childhood home. My father passed away 5.5 years ago, and about 10-11 months after he passed, I went back and cleaned out the house and said goodbye to the house, and this will be my first time back. And it really struck me this week as I was booking a hotel in Pittsburgh, realizing, holy shit, I don't have anything there anymore other than a storage unit full of crap. And it was just really sad. It brought up, I remember someone saying to me years ago, so I'm an only child, and they were an only child, and I've talked to other only children who felt the same way, of basically your house is your sibling. Like, your house is that partner for you in your adventures and your make-believe, and there's parts of the house that were the police station and parts that were where you hid the Charlie's Angels clues and the ransom notes, and and it just becomes another like extension of your imagination. And that's how I felt about the house, and the fact that I was basically born there, not in the house. But, my parents bought it, and they got married in 1968. I was conceived in 1969, and 1970 I was born, and they bought the house in 1969. So that's all I knew up until about 5 years ago. So this idea of going back, and I got excited though, because the people that bought the house, my dad's girlfriend, knew. It was like the neighbor's kid. And after they finished remodeling it, they let her in and they showed her what they did. And she said that, they had changed some things. I was like, why would you change? That doesn't make any sense. So when I realized I was coming out, I messaged Carol and I'm like, hey, I'm coming out. Can you reach out to them? I want to see the house. And she goes, good luck. They sold it about a year after they bought it. And my heart sank, because this opportunity to go in was taken. Mm-hmm. And I got so sad. I mean, it completely re-triggered the grief. I felt a lot of grief this week. And I thought about writing a letter to these new owners and saying, hey, I don't know if as you were buying this house, you saw the name Groover, and that's me, and I grew up there, and I would love just 10 minutes in the house. And I really considered writing that letter. And I talked to several people who said, I wouldn't do it because you think it's a good idea, but honestly, it's not your house anymore. And those things that you valued in it aren't there anymore. And that weird barrel on the wall that had little airplane bottles of booze that you used as the ransom note spot, they ripped that out. And the bar that your dad built, and then you put thumbtacks in the Naga hide with a big G, even though no one really drank in my house, where Barbie and all the hamsters lived, that's gone. And the carpet's different. And they put a bathroom in where it wasn't before. And, she said, couple of my clients said that it was almost more upsetting to see it now because they changed things and it isn't yours anymore. And so I kind of sat with that and I went, yeah. So I guess the question is, can you ever really go back? So.
Well, and I think it's interesting because as you're talking about it too, right? This is a house in Pittsburgh, right? And you said it's your land of make-believe. And I just went, oh man, Mr. Rogers, I mean, of all the places in the world, a little house in Pittsburgh is a place of make believe, but it's it's interesting because as we talk about this, and I've had, some similar experience. I just went back and saw my dad last week. And so I went back to Boise where I'm from, and it's the same thing. And I think it brings up some of the points from the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell
Mm,
talks about.
yep.
And I think we're both going to cry on, on this one.
I
So
already
here we
started.
go. Right. But, part of the hero's journey that a lot of people don't really focus on. We focus on the fighting and the going off and fighting, but there's the coming home,
Yeah,
right? There's the part
absolutely.
of the journey where we have to come home. And when we come home, we share what we learned. And most of the time it's not accepted by other people because they just don't get it. They weren't on the journey. They don't understand. And we get back home, and home is not what we left.
Yeah,
It may not have changed, or it may have changed,
right.
but we changed.
Yep.
And so, because of that, the hero almost never can stay at home. They
Mm,
always end up going off by themselves again. And we look at, you can look at movies and other things that kind of follow the hero's journey. Star Wars,
yeah.
same thing, right? Luke Skywalker goes off, fights all the stuff, saves the world, if you will, and then what happens? He comes back and he becomes a hermit on some island somewhere, just like Yoda, just
Hmm.
like Obi-Wan, right? Because it's we really can't go back home in the way that we remember it. That past no longer exists,
Yeah.
and it's hard. I mean, I think sometimes that's one of the hardest parts of the journey that nobody
Mm,
talks about.
yeah.
And so I think like your clients were saying, it's like, Kathy, I know how much you want to do that, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Your family energy is no longer in that house.
Yeah.
It physically looks different, because somebody else has claimed it and it has their energy, around it. And even as we were talking about before, Pittsburgh has changed
Yeah.
since you were a kid. Places that you grew up playing, you can't go
Hmm.
anymore.
Yeah. My
Those
high
aren't
school, my
the
high school's gone, and where my dad grew up is so bad. People said, "Don't go there. There's shootings all the time." And my high school's been torn down and redone. When my dad drove me past it, I literally went, "What the hell's this?" And he goes, "It's your high school." And I went, "No, it's not." I mean, it looked terrible. I don't know what they did to it. They fucked it up. It looked terrible. Um, the Pittsburgh Playhouse, which was one of the most special places in the world to me, they recently tore that down. My
Mhm.
college, which used to be two buildings and a glass walkway. I have an interesting fact about my college, but two buildings and a glass walkway, they've now taken up like 6 square blocks of downtown Pittsburgh. It's like,
Oh, wow.
holy shit. I mean, it's like, so yeah, things change, we change, but it's so interesting you brought that up, this idea of we want to go back, and it's either that's changed or we've changed. I have a weird fun fact about my college. So do you remember Rocky and Bullwinkle?
Yes.
So in the opening sequence of Rocky and Bullwinkle, they show this building and the squirrel flies off, circles around those, goes back in a window of this tall building. That's my college, because it was originally a like hotel or like a long-term stay kind of apartment sort of sitch. And the animator from Rocky and Bullwinkle lived there. And so when he drew the squirrel flying around the city, that was my building. That was my dorm,
It ended
basically.
up, yeah, turning into your college.
And it ended up turning into my college, which was a blast because everybody had a hotel room basically. So we had our own bathrooms. It was amazing. It was the best dorm ever. I was in it for 4 years and I'm like, can I just stay after I graduated? It's just so awesome. But yeah, so fun fact about Rocky and Bullwinkle,
Hmm.
because everyone needs to know that for Trivial Pursuit, later.
Yeah, but it's with this, I mean, you've got you've still got your trip coming up, right, where
Yep.
you'll be back there. But I know like I said, I just got back from a trip to Boise, and the same thing. I mean, I saw some people that I've known my whole life, and it was just different, you know.
Mhm.
I've moved on. I've made changes. Some of them have not.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
there was one person that was trying to make me feel guilty and shameful for something that I did over 50 years ago as a toddler. And it's like,
Yeah, Jason.
really? You're still holding on to that?
Wow.
You're still holding on to that, right? And from the different perspective that I have now, again, looking at people and maybe some people too that I had admired or respected, but now seeing them with a different lens, it's like, oh, well, this is different. It's not the same,
Yeah.
right? And I see things kind of in a different way now, and in a way, it's hard because you don't want to believe it, you don't want to see it, but the reality is things are changing all the time. Your high school gets torn down. I mean, different things like that happen. And, which is funny because I drove by, my dad lives very close to where my junior high was. And same thing, the main building on that campus burned down after I left.
Ooh.
And that was my award that I won in junior high, burned up with the school, right?
Oh.
Ah! Right. But what's interesting is that was the high school that my siblings went to.
Mm.
And then I went to junior high there, but the same thing. The main building is burned down. Yes, some of the buildings are still there, but it's not the same place where we went to school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. My grade school, they tore down the year after I left. So I was the last graduating class of Hebron Elementary. I don't think my junior high exists anymore. It's like everything's different. Um, there was a park I always used to go to, and the last time I went, it's this sort of like almost secret hidden park. Most people didn't even know it existed. So that was kind of fun. I'd go there and like meditate and hang out and just sort of daydream. And the last time I went, the footbridge over the creek, which was my favorite part of it, was gone. And I went, where the hell's the bridge? So it's like things evolve. I haven't lived in Pittsburgh since 1992. So, you know, I had a when we just got married, it's not even 2 months that we got married. A friend of mine from LA, who I've known since I moved to LA, she says, "Oh, are all your friends coming out from Pittsburgh?" And I said, "Honey, I don't have any friends in Pittsburgh. I have like two friends back there who I would not expect to, I don't even talk to them anymore. I wouldn't expect them to pick up and fly across the country and she goes, "Oh, but it'll still be nice." And I'm
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, what?"
Mhm.
I don't have huge ties back there except for, I mean, this might be my last trip back, except I have to go visit my shit in the storage unit. But it's
Mhm.
like once I show Eric and we go through and see the things and do the stuff, why would I go back? So it's like there is also this kind of feeling of, is this my final visit? Which, on one hand is like, okay. And on the other hand, it's like, but that was my home, you know?
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Well,
It's gonna be interesting being there.
yeah, and I think sometimes, I've been taught this for a long time, erase your past history.
Hmm.
And for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, but my history is who I am. Well, is it who you are? It made up a piece of who you are,
It
right? But
informs who you are.
it informs who you are, but it is not who you are, right? And so I think sometimes, we want to hold on to the past
Hmm.
because there's this deep-seated belief of who we are that we attach ourselves to that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and just like, again, you grew up in Pittsburgh, I grew up in Boise. Well,
Hmm.
I will have grown up in Boise. You will have
Right.
always have grown up in Pittsburgh, but Boise and Pittsburgh are not the same place, right, that they were when we grew up.
Mm.
I mean, the little town I lived in a little tiny town just outside of Boise, 2,000 people, right? When I was
Oh
growing up
boy.
there.
How many
Now
now?
now there's probably 60 or 70,000 people that live in
Wow.
the town,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like it's not the same place.
Yeah.
And can we let that go and realize that it doesn't mean anything less of me if
Yeah.
that doesn't exist anymore. And we've talked about that before, even from a time perspective. The past doesn't exist
Hmm.
anymore.
Yep.
As much as we want to believe it, and I guess in our memories, it does, right? But does it really? And do we need to spend time there, or do we just integrate and heal
Hmm.
and move on from that point? Because I know, again, you've had a lot of healing this week. You're going
Yeah.
to have a lot of healing over the next few weeks as you go back. you know I know, but then again, it's like, but then when you walk away, can you let it go? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to do that, but again, there's still little things that hook me
Yep.
and kind of pull me back in, and I have to stop and go, well, now hold it just a minute,
Yeah.
right? What I did when I was a little kid doesn't
Oh.
shouldn't carry over till today,
Hmm.
right? I got to let those things go, and my belief about life, about myself, about other people, sometimes I have to let go. And like I
Yeah.
said, there was some things this last week that I was like, holy shit. I knew, but I didn't want to believe.
Mm. Hmm.
And then when my partner was there with me, and I didn't say anything about certain things because I didn't want to, influence anything. And about 3/4 of the way through the week, she looked at me and she's like, now I understand why you do what you do, and why
Mm.
I couldn't understand before, but this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm feeling. Now I understand. And it's
Yeah.
like, fuck, right? I thought, that's why I had been acting, or doing things the way that I had been, because I thought this is what was going on, but I didn't want to believe it.
Mm.
And that can be a bitter pill to swallow,
Yeah.
right? Because often it means leaving behind people, leaving
Mm.
behind things, leaving behind memories.
Yeah.
And for some reason, as humans, we have a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who continue to hang on to things for decades. I mean, I told you, the thing they brought up was over 50 years ago. Are you
And how
kidding
did
me?
how did you respond to that? I mean, like, what did you say?
Well, I just kind of let it bounce off, because again, it's like, okay, I'm not going to let you shame me for something I did when I was a toddler.
Yeah, you're like, dude, that was 50 years ago. Like, what do you let me do
And
that?
yeah, and the fact that you changed my diapers, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not indebted to you anymore for changing my diapers. It's like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to give you my personal power
Yeah, that's
in allowing you to kind of lord over me for that.
hmm.
And the fact that I bit you, you probably deserved it.
And that's
Because hey, I was a toddler,
actually, and that's kind of what toddlers do. Now, if you bit
Yeah.
him on this trip,
That would be different.
I mean, frankly, if he was trying to change your diaper now and you bit him, I mean, that kind of makes sense because, like,
That
what are
that
you
would be a
doing?
little different, right? But how often, and I mean, everybody listening, myself, we all hang on to some of these things a lot longer than we need to.
Oh God,
Right.
yeah.
And I remember, because one of my friends just had a similar experience where he went back to where he was from. And it was like he thought that he had let certain stuff go before he went back. And, he learned again, right? And
Hmm.
so our mentor was kind of talking to him, and he's like, so have you let that history go? And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." Then he goes back on the trip, and he's like, "Oh shit," that a lot of times we hang on to things, and he he used a great analogy that it's like having a penny in your pocket, and we put the penny in our pocket because we don't want to deal with it, and we
Mhm.
forget about it, and we go along, and all of a sudden we stick our hand in our pocket and we pull out that penny, and there's a part of us that says you need to just get rid of the penny, right? But a part of us is like, no, I don't want to deal with the penny, so I'm going to put it back in my pocket.
Mhm.
Well, what's going to happen? You're going to go along a little bit later, you're going to stick your hand in your pocket and you're going to pull out that penny again, right? And it kind of goes back to that whole idea of suffering. It's like how many times are we going to suffer for the same thing
Mhm.
instead of just dealing with it, throwing out the penny, and moving on?
Yeah. It's interesting that this conversation took that turn because I'm listening to you say all this and I'm sort of just sinking into that. And I don't feel most of that. Like, I don't feel
Hmm.
what you just described. Because to me, every time I find that penny, it's a reminder to me of the abundance of the universe.
Ah,
And I hold on to that penny. And when I find it, I go, oh, I got a penny. To me, there's an excitement about that rediscovery. Um,
and I guess
so
it
it's,
probably depends on the emotions attached to the experience or the thing, right?
yeah,
Because again, my friend was talking about it kind of like from a challenge, a negative thing, a
yeah,
trauma in his life.
right.
But it can be the flip side too, right? It can be a great thing that we want to
Yeah.
keep remembering
Yeah, I
as
I
well.
I feel like I let a lot of those. I mean, I left so long ago, and one thing I have to give my dad enormous credit for is it got to the point in our relationship where, yeah, he was my dad and I was his kid, but we were two adults on a completely equal level. And it's so common for people when they go back home, they revert back to this 13-year-old or this 10-year-old, or there was a play, and I think I remember telling you this, where the husband and the wife are talking about going back to visit her childhood home, and they're so excited and they pack their bags and they walk off stage, and the next time the curtain opens and they walk on stage, it's her childhood home and her parents are there, and the doorbell rings and the door opens and it's the husband and an 8-year-old, and
Ah,
the
she
entire
turned back
rest
into the
of the
little girl.
play she reverted back to this little kid, and the husband's like, what the fuck just happened? And you see this young actress acting like the wife, but has reverted back to this childhood. And by the end of the play, when they'll go to kiss their parents and leave, the cry, the adult comes in and the kid leaves. It's such a moving show because that's what happens, right? We revert back to that childhood. Um, I don't feel like I have that because my dad and I were able to meet on a level where we were just adults.
So
So,
that's a beautiful thing because I think, like you said, that little kid showing up, I think is what happens so much of the time.
oh,
And
yeah,
throughout my life, when this person would say those things to me, that little kid would show up again,
yep.
right?
Ego states.
And this time, little kid didn't show up. It's like, no, I'm a fucking adult.
Yep.
And you're not going to, use little tricks like that to try to make me feel inferior or put me in my place,
Yeah.
right? It's not going to work because now I can understand the energy behind why
Mm,
this person was doing it. And it's like, I'm not going there. I'm
yeah.
not going there. And so I think, maybe again, that's part of it. And for each person listening, it's like, do we go back into that little kid ego state or that whatever the ego state was at the
Yeah.
time, or are we looking at it and experiencing it from a different state? And because I think that's probably the one of the keys to going back
Hmm.
is we really do go back a different person, and can we show up as that different person
Yeah.
when we go back? And it's beautiful that you had that relationship with your dad, right? Because part of that was already kind of worked through because little
Yeah.
Kathy wasn't the one showing up, right? And so that makes a huge difference. And I think the
Yeah.
quicker that we can all kind of get through that and realize it's not going to be the same as we remember.
Right.
We don't have to show up in the old ego state. We can show up in the power of who we are now and see things for what they are in our current state.
Yep.
You know, and not sit there and wish and hope and pray that things, you know, go back to the way they were in the good old days.
Yeah, because when you really start to think about that, you're like,
No.
how good were they?
I remember I was younger. We had in our church, we would go and visit other families, right? So I used to go with my dad, and I remember this old guy. He was the grandfather of some friends of mine, right, that were the same age. And I remember going in because he was, I don't even know how old he was. I mean, he was old at the time, right? And this was a long time ago.
Right.
So he lived through a lot of things in the early
Mhm.
part of the century. And I remember, you know, I was maybe 14 years old, something like that. And I remember him saying, you know, people talk about the good old days and they want to go back to the good old days. Well, I lived through the good old days, and I'm telling you, the good old days weren't as good as we think they were. I'm not going back.
Yeah.
And that always kind of stuck with me of, you know, I think sometimes we want to go back because we think we're going to go back to this utopia that we remember, but it's like when you do, it's not the same. And I think often
Mhm.
we're disappointed, which I think is why your clients were saying, Kathy, I don't think you want to write that letter.
Yeah, don't go in the house, because I was very smart. I was half smart. I videotaped walking through the house, videotaped, because it's 1986. Speaking about going back, but on my phone recorded the house, and I did the backyard. Unfortunately, I didn't do the game room in the basement, which is like where my life was. So that's sort of a bummer, because that's sort of where I made all those memories and created my own little business, and I had my vet practice, and I had my Wonder Woman stay. You know, it's like, whew, it was
The land of make
the
believe.
land of make believe was down there. So that's all right. And you know, if we happen to drive by, and we're going to drive by, I'm going to show Eric where it is, and I'll show who lived where, and maybe we'll walk up this little dead end street. And if they happen to be outside, I might go, "Hi, this is my house." You know, I'm going to leave it up to that, but I don't think I'm going to force. You know, I do still have the key.
Which I'm sure has been changed.
You never know.
Your two owners.
People don't always do that, but you know,
Yeah.
if you get a phone call, Jason, can you come get me? I'm in prison.
I'm in Pittsburgh prison right now.
Pittsburgh prison, that's what they call it. Yeah. So anyway, all right, we should end this conversation. This was fabulous. Yeah. Can you ever go back? And when you do, it's probably not going to be the same. So weigh the options of what you want that to look like.
Yeah, and just heal and integrate anything that you need to, right, to make sure that you've taken care of the past and show up kind of in a different ego state. So
yeah, cool. All right. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygroover.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.
See ya.